Chase, good to see you, man. And Matt Barrows, who's one of my favorites covering the Niners for The Athletic, had an article up yesterday that I thought was pretty interesting. He has 6 different scenarios for the 49ers as far as the top of the draft. And he goes through, basically a grouping of 6 different groupings of 4 prospects that appear to be basically around the Niner needs, which is, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, edge rusher, linebacker. Those, there's none of these include a receiver, none include a running back. And I definitely think there's opportunity that there could be, one of those guys there, maybe a tight end, maybe something we're not thinking of, maybe a defensive back, maybe a corner. Some people have said Jedi Barron and Will Johnson could be Niners. But what do you think of Barrows? For those who don't have this in front of them, I'll just give you the quick synopsis. As I said, he's got 6 of these. So, number 1, Mason Graham, Anthony Belton, Chris Paul, Jordan Birch. Option 2, Mikael Williams, Darius Alexander, Alfred Collins, Chase Lunt. Option 3, Derek Harmon, JT Tuamolo, Jeffrey Bassa, CJ West. Option 4, Walter Nolan, Jack Sawyer, Charles Grant, Jamare Caldwell. Option 5, James Pierce, Tyleek Williams from Ohio State, Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, Barrett Carter, a linebacker from Clemson. And then the last option is Shamar Stewart, Ariante Ursary, TJ Sanders, Jordan Phillips. So 6 different options there. It kind of reminds me of like a restaurant that I don't like, where every entree has some ingredient that kind of makes me go, I don't want that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, it sounds great except for the sardines,
right?
Oh, it sounds awesome except for the liver. It sounds great except for the whatever food you just can't stand. And that's what I feel like every single one of these. It's like a good dinner ruined by one bad ingredient. Like, so for me, I don't like Alfred Collins from Texas, and I'm not a big Mikael Williams fan. So that number 2 group is ruined by that. I don't like Derek Harmon and JT Tuamolo. So the 3rd group is ruined for me there. I don't like Jack Sawyer, even though I know he was good at Ohio State. I think he's kind of stiff. And I'm not a big Jamare Caldwell fan. So that one kind of doesn't do it for me. Not huge on I guess not. Tyleek Williams, not bad. I guess the 5th one, E, is not bad. And then the last group, I'm not a huge fan of TJ Sanders. Otherwise, I kind of like that group. But of those 6 groupings of 4 picks, do you have a favorite or do you have a least favorite?
I'm not sure if I have a favorite or a least favorite. I think that you put it well, where you like some players who San Francisco could take with those first few picks. And Matt Barrows is listing these of all of the Niners selections inside the top 100. And I like some players. I don't like others. Honestly, I thought the best mock draft that I've seen from an NFL draft analyst, or at least one of them, was Matt Miller of ESPN. I really like what he did. He had cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan going to the Niners, round 1, pick 11. Defensive tackle Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss in the 2nd round. Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota in the 3rd round. And then Cameron Williams out of Texas in the 3rd round as well. So that really addresses a lot of the Niners' needs. Cornerback, defensive tackle, and offensive tackle. What's interesting for Barrows is that he did not list corner as one of the big needs on this team, but I think it is. You have Diamador Lenore and Renardo Green. Outside of that, you need players there badly at that cornerback position, and it's a very important position. I always think with my building strategy specifically, you build an offensive line, defensive line, and then on defense in particular, you kind of have to find corners after that. And, of course, all of those positions come after the quarterback spot. And I think the Niners are going to get a deal done with Brock Purdy. And so they have their quarterback in Purdy there. And when you look around some of these other mock drafts from some of these top NFL draft analysts, a lot of them do have the Niners going corner at number 11, which I find to be interesting. I think they have to go in the trenches, but I've seen Jahdae Barron to the Niners at number 11. I've seen Will Johnson to the Niners at number 11. If I were to go with one of those two corners, I'd probably go Will Johnson. I think that he has big playability. A lot of the interceptions that he's had, he's brought back for touchdowns. I like his body, and I think that skill set translates very well to the next level. And then you have some versatility with how you want to use Renardo Green and Diamador Lenore. As far as Barrows's options here, if Mason Graham were to fall to the Niners at number 11, I think that would be a great pick. There are some red flags with the pre-draft medical testing because Michigan listed him around 325 pounds. And then at the NFL Combine, he weighed in at like 296. And so some people really worry about the lack of physicality, the lack of size, and then he was also on a defensive line alongside Kenneth Grant and Josiah Stewart. And so there was a lot of talent there, but I think he's good against the run. I think he's good against the pass. And I just think that he's a really good football player. So if Graham fell to the Niners at number 11, I'd be about it. In the second round with that first option, Anthony Belton is a massive offensive tackle out of NC State. He is huge at 6'6", 336 pounds with 34-inch arms. He needs some refinement, but I think down the road he could develop into a really dominant player. Chris Paul out of Ole Miss, the linebacker, I'm so on. Jordan Birch, the defensive end out of Oregon. That's a really loaded Oregon defense as far as some of their draft prospects. And so I think the Niners like those Oregon guys because they went squad deep at their pro day last week. Scenario B, Mykel Williams out of Georgia, I think would be a really good pick. He has size. He's relentless. He's physical, 5 sacks, 9 TFLs last year. I like his instincts, but then again, as you mentioned, some of the other players I'm kind of lukewarm on. Chase Lunt is a player who I find to be very interesting if the Niners don't go offensive tackle early, because he's a player who reminds me a little bit of like a Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. So much experience at the college level where he played so much at offensive tackle, but if you want to move him inside to guard, you can do that. But I kind of like the value there. Rick Harmon at number 11 in scenario C. He's a freak athlete. He ran a sub 5 40-yard dash at 313 pounds. He has a lot.
Who are you talking about? Harmon?
Yeah, Derek Harmon. A lot of quickness at the line of scrimmage. And I think he's more of a reach at number 11. If you were to trade back, I like the value there a little bit better. If you traded into the back end of the first round, I think that you could get a player in Harmon who can be a good player down the road. 1 year of really good production, but the production that he had was impressive. I think he had more than 50 pressures. And so, yeah, like I think you put it well. Some of the players you really like. Some of the other players you don't really like. Another one that pops to my mind, defensive tackle CJ West out of Indiana. I think he's a pretty good athlete too. What the Niners need is disruptive players and good players. And I like your philosophy, right? Don't worry about the position. This is a team that's bereft of talent and depth. They need to get younger, and they need to hit on these picks. You can't have swings and misses. And so what you have to prioritize, drafting good players.
No question. No question. Drafting good players and guys who are not just workout guys, but guys who are actually good football players. I guess that first group would probably be what I'd go with. Mason Graham, Anthony Belton, Chris Paul, Jordan Birch. There's nobody in that group that I just absolutely don't like. I'm not as much of a believer in Mykel Williams. I'm not a believer in Derek Harmon. Interesting. I'm watching, you cover the Eagles as well. And probably, do you digest Niner and Eagle media? Give me an example. Do you look at the Ross Tucker podcast? Ross Tucker does some Eagles stuff. It seems like he's very Eagle centric. I know he didn't play for the Eagles, but
he's from Pennsylvania. He does their preseason broadcasts.
Yeah, so he's very tied into the Eagles. Greg Cosell, who's works for NFL Films, he's there in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, or whatever. That's really close to Philly. Yeah, he does a lot of stuff in Philly too. And you could say that's his home market. So they, the Ross Tucker podcast, he has Greg Cosell on, and so I did a deep dive last night after one of the streams I was doing, and just started watching on YouTube all of Greg's breakdowns on Ross's podcast and other shows. Greg does a show out of Buffalo. He does a bunch of them. Anyway, and he just, in different segments, one time he broke down receivers, one time he broke down defensive ends, one time he broke down defensive tackles. And Greg's thought is that Walter Nolan is far and away the best defensive tackle in the class. He calls him a power 3 technique. He says he's really, really a great player. He plays hurt. He plays hard. The guy's an overwhelming player. And he had him over Kenneth Grant, over Derek Harmon. He likes Joshua Farmer from Florida State as well. But he liked Nolan more than, the rest of them. Omar Norman Lott, Alfred Collins, Tyreek Williams. And I agree with that. And yet, Matt Miller's mock yesterday from ESPN has Walter Nolan falling to the Niners in the second round.
Yep.
I can't see Walter Nolan getting by the Eagles and Chiefs at the end of the first round. What's your thoughts on Walter Nolan? Should the Niners, would you be in favor of Walter Nolan? Should they trade back from 11 a few spots and try to take him there in the mid-teens? Invader 49er says Matt Miller has never been credible. I don't know about that. I think Matt Miller's pretty credible.
I think he's on ESPN for a reason.
Yeah, and believe me, I've known this guy for years.
You had him on your show recently, didn't you?
I had him on the show a couple weeks ago, but I went out to dinner with him, before Super Bowl 47 in New Orleans. We went out and partied in New Orleans. When he was working for Bleacher Report, this guy knows the personnel for sure.
Yeah.
And once again, we were just showing his mock draft there. And I like his mock draft. I think his mock draft there's a lot of, a lot of interesting names there. He goes Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, Arianti Ursary, Cam Williams on day 1 and day 2. And then he came back on day 3 with an overwhelming day 3. Savion Jones from LSU. I love him. RJ Harvey from Central Florida. Love him. Riley Leonard is the quarterback I like the most. They got him in the 7th round. Willie Lampkin's the offensive interior lineman I like the most. They got him in the 7th round. So I kind of liked Matt Miller's breakdown of this thing. But what do you think of Walter Nolan, period? I mean, do you like Nolan? Would you target him? It seems like the Niners at 11 could it seems like it plays perfectly. I don't think Nolan is going 43 like Matt does. I think he's probably going between 15 and 25. But if I were the Niners, I think I would trade back from 11 to 15 or 17 or 18 and see if I could get a couple extra picks and take Walter Nolan there comfortably in front of the best teams at the end of the first round. What's your thought on Nolan?
Yeah, shout out to Ross Tucker, by the way, friend of the show. I was helping him with his YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago, and I think Greg Cosell is one of the OG film watchers in NFL media. I just really trust his football mind. And so when he says Walter Nolan is his favorite defensive tackle of the class, I think it's pretty telling. I've been on the Walter Nolan train for a little while, and I think you brought him to my attention in the midway portion of this past season when you were like, I really like that Ole Miss kid, Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle. So I started to look into him, and he's one of my favorite players in this draft class for San Francisco. And some people might think it's a little bit of a reach to take him at number 11, but if the Niners really love him, and if they think that he can be a dominant player at a position of importance like defensive tackle, where the Niners need talent, need depth, you look at the formula that the Philadelphia Eagles had to beat the boogeymen in the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that the Niners haven't been able to beat. It's beating you up along the offensive line and beating you up along the defensive line and getting a pass rush on the quarterback. And in the Niners' 2 Super Bowl losses against Kansas City, they haven't been able to do that well enough. Early in Super Bowl 58, they got after Patrick Mahomes a little bit. But look at what the Eagles did. They dropped 7 back in coverage. They generated 25 pressures. They did not blitz once, and they had pressure coming from the edge. They had pressure coming from the interior. And Milton Williams balled out in the Super Bowl with a couple of sacks. He ends up getting $26 million from the New England Patriots. Moro Ajomo is going to step in for him. He's a really good developmental player. Look at the value that Chris Jones has on the Chiefs. Look at how much the Niners have missed DeForest Buckner. And so defensive tackle is a position where if you can muddy up the pocket, right up the gut, and blur the sight line for a quarterback, that's what the Eagles did. Patrick Mahomes looked as lost and as flustered as he ever has in his NFL career. And I think Walter Nolan would help the Niners do that greatly. And what impresses me about him is that he's also really good against the run. He had a pass rush grade of 75, a true pass rush grade of 80.8, but he had a run defense grade of 91.6 for Ole Miss. Good size at 6'3", 305. He's very explosive at the line of scrimmage. He plays until the end of the whistle, sometimes through it. He's very violent. And I think that all of those skills fit what the Niners desperately need, but it translates to the NFL level. And what he was able to do this past year, the sack numbers were good. He had 6 of them. He had 4 quarterback hits, 25 pressures. That's pretty impressive. In 2023 with Texas A&M, PFF credited him with 7 sacks. And so that's really good production year over year. I don't think there's any chance that Walter Nolan lasts until 43. I think there is a chance where if the Niners want to trade back a little bit, I'm not opposed to it. Maybe you get back into the end of the first round, or you pick up another second, maybe another third, and you can get Walter Nolan in the middle of the first, at the end of the first, depending on how the board falls and which quarterbacks go, because that's going to really impact what happens on night 1 of the draft. And yeah, if the Niners come away with Walter Nolan, I'd be ecstatic about that. And that's one of Matt Barris's options, scenario D, Walter Nolan to the Niners, round 1, pick number 11.
Walter Nolan's a special player, and Greg thinks he's the best of the defensive tackles. Let's talk defensive ends for a second, because Greg also had another video where he's going through the defensive ends, and he's talking about Shamar Stewart, and he's like, he's a freakish athlete, but he doesn't know how to use his hands, and he's really raw, needs coaching. He talked about James Pierce, and he said he's perfect for a wide 9 defensive front because he needs space to operate. And, of course, the Niners run the wide 9. He seemed to like Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. He says, I really like him. He looked really good. He can set up offensive tackles. He likes Scorton. I don't see special in Scorton. Greg does like Mikael Williams. But the guy that he sounded the most excited about in the edge rushing group was Landon Jackson.
Okay.
He says, 6'6", 270. He said, man, this guy's long. He's like, I've watched this guy for 2 years of tape, and I really like this kid. He compared him to Max Crosby.
Okay.
And said he's got a 10'9" broad jump, 10-inch hands at 270 pounds. He said the length, he said he just gets a lot of Crosby vibes watching him. Obviously, Crosby's a great player. That's music to the ears of 49er fans, I'm sure. What do you think of Landon Jackson or James Pierce? He also said he liked Mike Green. He said that he's got lots of moves. Green is an undersized guy, but Pierce, Scorton, Mikael Williams, Jordan Birch. He wasn't a big fan of Tuamolo or Sawyer. Said that they're pass rushing specialists, and he said they'd have to be playing in a rotation. They're not full-time defensive ends. But Pierce he liked, but I know I've heard some bad things about Pierce's personality.
Yeah.
But he really likes Landon Jackson. And to me, Landon Jackson would be a very, very nice pick for the 49ers if they could either get him at 43 or if they could trade back at the end of the first round and take him there.
The benefit that the Niners have in this draft, in particular along the defensive line at edge and especially at defensive tackle, is optionality. And it's a really deep defensive line class. And that's evidenced by a player like Landon Jackson, who I think might fall to the second round. He tested very well at the NFL Combine when I was there in Indianapolis back a few weeks ago, a 9.88 relative athletic score grade. He's 6'6", weighed in at 264 pounds, 40.5-inch vertical, the 10-plus foot broad jump that you mentioned, and then his 40-yard dash at that size was a 4.69. So he has this
cooking.
relentless speed that's impressive. And
Yeah.
so if the Niners went offensive line or even defensive tackle in round 1, and then they could get Landon Jackson at pick number 43, I would like that, because he is somebody who can really play bully ball and win on strength and then win with some technique as well. I'm kind of with you on Jack Sawyer. Like, he reminds me of a Trent Cole type of player who went 5th round out of Cincinnati, where he's not twitchy. He doesn't have crazy bend, but he won with power rush moves, and he won because he hustled and never gave up on plays. But he went in the 5th round, and Jack Sawyer is going in some mocks in the 2nd round. I think that could be a little bit of a reach. I do like how Sawyer has a knack for making really big plays. A player who I also really like, who you mentioned, is Mike Green. Now, obviously, like James Pierce, he has some character concerns. He's twice been accused of sexual assault, once in high school, once at Virginia. He was suspended by Virginia in 2022. Then he transferred to Marshall. But this past year, he had more than 20 TFLs. That led the country. He had 17 sacks. That also led the country. He really popped against Ohio State early in the year, and Ohio State has multiple offensive linemen who are going to get drafted and I think be high-level players at the next level. And Mike Green is a player who does have speed, twitch, bend. Some people are concerned about his size. He's 250 pounds, though. I'm totally fine with that. And I like the pass rush arsenal that he has. He has a lot of different moves. Sometimes he can rely on the spin move a little bit too much. But if you're looking for an edge rusher who has really good ability, really good production, who I think can help impact games from the jump, Mike Green, there's some risk taking him there at number 11, but I'm certainly intrigued by the player, no doubt.
We're just getting warmed up here on a Friday. Chase Senior in the house. We're talking some Niners, looking ahead to the draft. We're inside of a month now to go before draft day. One of the interesting angles on this thing is that it's pretty clear to me, I think, that the 49ers are going to go for a running back in this draft.
Yep.
And it's hard to picture. It's hard to know exactly which one they should draft. Matt Miller's got him taking RJ Harvey in the 4th round. I love that idea. I mean, I'm a big fan of RJ Harvey from Central Florida. I think, he's fast. He runs 4.4 flat. The Niners also, and this was just yesterday I saw this. Let me see if I have it in front of me. The Niners odds on Ashton Gienti. The Niners had the 4th highest odds at plus 1,100 to draft Ashton Gienti out of Boise. Thought that was really interesting. And then I'm looking at today's numbers from Dane Brugler. He put this out a couple hours ago that ASU had their pro day, and Cam Scatabo, they measured him at 5'9", 219 pounds. His 40 was 4.65. He had a vertical of 39.5 inches. I like Cam Scatabo, but he's not a day 2 guy. He's not. And it's funny. It's like Brian Peacock, who hosts Locked On 49ers, said that his comp was Rex Burkhead. And I'm looking at Burkhead's numbers. Scatabo 5'9", 219. Burkhead 5'10", 214. Scatabo ran 4.65. Burkhead ran 4.7. Scatabo had a 39.5 vertical. Burkhead had a 39-inch vertical. So, yeah, workout number-wise, Burkhead and Scatabo, and I think that might be a decent comp, actually, as well. Are you a Scatabo guy? And if not, give me the running back. Some people I've seen the Niners tied to Travion Henderson. I've seen a lot of people, Dieter last night really likes DJ Giddens. Greg Cosell was really talking up Damian Martinez.
Okay.
Which I thought was really interesting. The running back from Miami. There's all kinds of running backs I love. I love Taj Brooks. I love Raheem Sanders. Eric Reed's brother for the safety, basically Justin Reed, said that Jaden Blue he thought was a perfect Niner, and Jaden Blue just ran a 4.38 or something, or maybe 4.28 at Texas's pro day. He's the fastest running back in the entire class. Which running back do you think is the best fit for the Niners in the wide zone?
Man, I'll tell you what, this is a very deep running back class. And I think it's important for San Francisco to draft one. Christian McCaffrey's getting older, coming off an injury-plagued season in which he only played 4 games, but injuries have haunted him at moments in his career. Isaac Guerendo is extremely talented. At 220 to run 4.3, it's ridiculous, but he's dealt with hamstring issues going back to college and again at the NFL level. You brought back Patrick Taylor. You have Israel Abanikanda. I just think it's time for the Niners to bring in a young running back who is going to be under team control for the next 4 years. As far as Ashton Genty goes, he's one of the safest picks in this draft. A lot of people really like him. Suddenness with his movements, really good balance, good vision. I'm just not taking Genty at number 11. I can't do it. But in a year where the Niners need a running back, my gosh, they're going to be able to get a really good one either day 2 or day 3. I love Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. I think he might go in the first round. But after that, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State as well. I'm a big fan of Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. He has some breakaway speed. Cam Skattebo, disappointed to see him run a 4.65. I think that he can make up for it with the physicality, though, and the contact balance that he has with his lower half, I think sets him apart from Rex Burkhead. So I wouldn't really compare him to Rex Burkhead. I think that Skattebo is a different player and a better player. I also think he's really capable of catching the ball out of the backfield. And if you want some positional versatility, Skattebo can play a little bit of fullback. Dylan Sampson was very productive at Tennessee. Devin Neal out of Kansas. DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. Jordan James out of Oregon. RJ Harvey ran, I think, a 4.5 at the combine, but he has really good production the last couple of years out of UCF, running it, finding the end zone, and catching the ball out of the backfield. Damian Martinez is an interesting player. LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse is only 20 years old, and he has some good production. So if you want a running back who's younger, has been productive as far as putting up numbers, but doesn't have as much tread on the tires, LaQuint Allen could be an interesting player. And then you look furthermore, you could get these guys later, day 3. Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, Brashard Smith out of SMU. Bashal Tutin, I think, ran the fastest 40-yard dash among running backs. He was a 4.3 guy. Jaden Blue at his pro day this past week ran under a 4.3. If we're talking about fits, I think Jaden Blue is the best fit for the Niners. He does have some ball security concerns. He did give it up and cough it up a few times this past year, but he was highly productive. He'd be a good scheme fit. Steve Sarkisian runs a lot of the same elements of Kyle Shanahan's offense with some of that outside zone where you need patience and then see hole, hit hole. You have the home run ability there with Blue. And Bobby Turner is one of the top running backs coaches of all time. And I'm going to trust that he can develop a player like Jaden Blue, work on some of those weaknesses like coughing the football up. So Blue, I think, would be my favorite fit. But man, there's so many good running backs in this class. The list really does go on and on and on.
They call this lying season. Bahim says Josina Anderson report. Saleh likes Derek Harmon because of his ability to anchor versus double teams versus the run, and believes he can fix up his missed tackles versus the run and lack of ability to finish sacks. So this is interesting. Derek Harmon has some really good numbers as a pass rusher. I believe he had 55 pressures this year. I think that's the most among defensive tackles in the class. But his grades against the run are particularly bad. And I kind of view this as lying season. I think maybe if Robert Saleh might be using Josina Anderson to put out a interest in a player that they have no interest in. That would be my guess, because the numbers on Derek Harmon are that he really struggles against the run. And so for him to come out and say, yeah, he really likes him against the run, I don't know. That to me sounds like a smokescreen. What do you think?
Yeah, and I didn't see that report from Josina Anderson. She was all over the head coaching search. She did a great job there, and then she had some misses in free agency. I imagine, she might have a little bit of relationship with Robert Saleh. The one thing about bringing in Saleh that I'm excited about and what good coaches do. I mean, look at what Vic Fangio did with the Eagles, right? They went from literally one of the worst defenses in football in 2023. They draft Quinyon Mitchell-Cooper-DeJean in the first and second round, Jalix Hunt in the third, but he turned around that defense with quality coaching, better scheme. They were much more organized. They were a better tackling team. Everybody flew to the ball. They were in sync. They made big plays. They generated turnovers. That's all because of coaching. What you also saw was so much player development and these players taking massive leaps year over year. So when you bring in a coordinator like Robert Saleh, what I'm so excited about, he can take some of these players, he can maximize them, he can put them in a position to succeed. Some of these low money deals that the Niners have signed free agents to this offseason, I think that Robert Saleh can turn them into really good players. And then also get some of these young players on track. I want to see what Robert Saleh and Chris Kosera can do with Evan Anderson, who showed flashes last year. I want to see Robert Saleh get Jair Brown back on track where he's playing like he did in his rookie year, not when he was over pursuing and missing tackles, leading to big plays in his second year. And so I trust Robert Saleh to develop players and identify players. Look at what he did with Bryce Huff. He had 10 sacks, and then last year Huff couldn't do anything. And so if Saleh likes a player and he likes Derek Harmon, I'm trusting Robert Saleh in his player evaluations because he's proven to be right more times than not.
It's funny. I'm looking at this football note. Big news in the NFL media world. Peter Schrager is leaving Fox and the NFL Network and will be joining ESPN. Yeah. Do you know Peter Schrager?
Oh, yeah. Friend of the show. He follows me on Twitter. I follow him. I've communicated with him a few times. So that's actually happening. He's leaving NFL Network for ESPN.
That's what it sounds like. At least that's the report.
Wow.
Andrew Marchand,
he's always on it. That's huge. I mean, so that's going to put a dent into Good Morning Football because he was maybe the best face or the most well-known face on that show. And that's a huge pickup for ESPN.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting thing, a buddy of mine who I scouted with in the 90s used to say of pass coverage. He's like, you know what the key to pass coverage is? And I'm like, what? He's like, pass coverage. In other words, there is no key to pass coverage. You got to have dudes. And I bring this up because look at Fangio. He comes in, he goes for Cooper-DeJean, he goes for Quinyon Mitchell. And they go from the worst pass defense in the game, or one of the worst at the end of last year, to the number one defense in football, and they win the Super Bowl on the strength of their defense. And to me, it seems like those two defensive backs had a huge, profound impact on their season. I bring it up because today or yesterday at the Texas Pro Day, Jedi Barron worked out. And then afterwards, he held court with the media, and he said, I most definitely believe that I am cornerback one. I'm so versatile. I can do a lot. I can go play corner. I can play nickel. So I'm what you need. I can go through it for you in the most humblest way. He won the Thorpe Award this year as the best defensive back in the country to back up his claim. 3 seasons with the Longhorns. He played over 1,100 snaps at outside corner, 900 in the slot, 495 in the box, according to PFF. 5'11", 194 pounds. He's expected to be a first rounder. Some of the mocks have him going, in the 20s. Some have him going higher. What do you think? I mean, how key was Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean to the Eagles' turnaround? Should the Niners consider maybe a corner? And a lot of talk about Will Johnson, but isn't Barron really the guy? I mean, Barron's the guy that reminds me of Brian Branch. He's physical. He's tough. He's a hitter. I don't see him ever miss tackles. He won the Thorpe Award. How good is Jedi Barron? Is he as clean a prospect this year as Quinyon Mitchell was last year? And do you think the Niners ought to start their rebuild on defense with him?
Yeah, I like Barron a lot. I was actually around his podium for the entirety of his press conference at the NFL Combine, and he really made it a point to let people know about his versatility, where the way that Texas used him, and they have a really good defensive coordinator, a really good defense, he was kind of like the Swiss Army knife of that defense. He lined up outside, but they asked him to do a bunch of different things. And he played well within all of those different roles, and then also succeeded in man coverage, in zone coverage. And then he goes to the NFL Combine. He ran very well. So he's a quick player, really good athlete. With DBs, maybe the most important thing that I look at, the pass breakup numbers passes defended? Do you have instincts to make plays on the ball? You can run 4-2, but if you don't have feel, if you can't read and diagnose plays, if you can't anticipate, if you don't have instincts to attack the football while it's in the air, those are natural skills that sometimes can't be taught. Those are natural skills that are sometimes instinctual and within the player. And so with a player like Quinyon Mitchell, I loved him coming out of Toledo. I didn't care about the small school level. What was incredible to me is that he had more than 40 pass breakups his last 2 years. Incredible number. So with Jahdae Barron, makes plays on the football, as evidenced by the PBUs. With a player like Will Johnson, he does the same. Will Johnson might be a little bit more of a gambler as far as being like a Trayvon Diggs, where he tries to attack the football so that he can come through with the pick six and an interception, and sometimes he'll bite and then he'll get beat. But sometimes you're willing to take those risks. Like Asante Samuel had a great career playing that same way. He was undersized, but he had such great anticipatory skills, and he gambled. But sometimes when he gambled, they were huge plays, and that's why his interception numbers were so good. And so I like Barron. I like Johnson. I think Travis Hunter is actually a better corner than both of those players, most likely. But with Travis Hunter, you're not sure if he's going to play wide receiver and corner. And if he does play both positions, is there going to be a little bit of a workload balance? Is he going to be on a little bit of a pitch count? But I think that in this corner class, Hunter, Barron, Johnson, I really like them. And I think there's a little bit of a gap to everybody else.
What's your read on Aiyuk early in the week? Not Howard Schultz, but
Jordan Schultz.
Jordan Schultz, Howard Schultz's
son of Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks.
That's right. Howard Schultz's son, who's a Fox Sports NFL insider, said the Niners are open to trading Brandon Aiyuk, but view it as unlikely that anyone would trade for his contract after the ACL injury. That was the report early in the week. And then, of course, Adam Schefter had a report about this as well today. He said, despite conflicting reports about the team reaching out, there hasn't been any significant trade interest in Brandon Aiyuk, according to Schefter. He says nobody wants to take on the contract when you don't know when the guy is going to be healthy again this season. But from what I understand, Dr. Neil Elatrache is pleased with his progress. He's coming along. I would think he's ready to play by mid-season, and there might be a team out there that is willing to basically not give up very much to get a great player who's coming off the injury. This was Schefter via the podcast, and that was put out on 49er website. This is interesting because I've been saying that last part for weeks, which is the one part of this we don't know the answer to is we don't know how low the Niners ask potentially could go because we don't know how motivated the Niners are to get that money back and how motivated they are to move off of this player. I don't believe anybody's out there dying to get an injured player and to pay top dollar for them in draft pick compensation or trade compensation. The question is, are the Niners hard pressed to get out from underneath this contract? And they're willing. I mean, Dieter suggested last night that the Niners would have to include draft pick compensation to Aiyuk to get a team to potentially trade for him. I don't think he's right on that. I think that the price tag, if the Niners are willing to give away Aiyuk for a day 3 pick or a player or some combination of that, I think they probably still could move him. What do you make of the Schefter report? In some ways, it makes you wonder why he's reporting it at all. There's no real new news here. And then when he throws the last line, and there might be a team out there that's willing to basically not give up very much to get a great player who's coming off the injury, that's basically the scenario that I've been painting for weeks, which is, yeah, you can't get a 3rd-round pick for Brandon Aiyuk, but if you're willing to take some nominal player and 2 6th-round picks, I think you probably still could move him. What is your guess of what's going on here? Do you think, Lynch easily could have put this to bed and didn't. So we know he's available. There's no doubt from the Niner perspective, he's available. The question is, what are they asking? And is that ask going to come down to a level that enables them to trade him What do you think ultimately they will ask for at the 11th hour?
Well, I thought the biggest update from Schefter was the injury update. He spoke with the surgeon, who's a world-renowned surgeon, and he said Aiyuk most likely is going to come back at some point midway through the year. And so you think about this Niners offense coming off the heels of what was a very frustrating 2024 season. What does that mean for the Niners? Kyle Shanahan's going to have to coach better. Christian McCaffrey's going to have to stay healthy. Brock Purdy's going to have to perform better. They're going to rely on George Kittle more in the pass game. But now your top 5 at wide receiver is Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, Demarcus Robinson, Jacob Cowing, and Tariq Owens. And so with Aiyuk missing potentially half the season, I think that impacts this Niners offense a lot. And it was a bad knee injury that he suffered, ACL, MCL. You see Stephon Diggs, he just signed with the Patriots. He gets $26 million in guaranteed money. Number one, that takes the Patriots away from trading for Aiyuk because they gave Diggs all that money. He tore his ACL. Looks as though he's going to be ready for week 1. But because of the severity of Aiyuk's knee injury, according to Schefter, he might not be back until the middle portion of the season. So I think that impacts this Niners offense a lot just because of the player that Aiyuk is when he's healthy. Deep ball guy, every single route to his route tree, one of the best route runners in the NFL, unbelievable footwork. But it makes sense that no teams want to trade for him either, right? With the way that he handled the contract, the whole practice shorts spat with Kyle Shanahan, had a bad attitude. He got paid. And then after missing all of training camp in the preseason, he looks like shit to start the year where he's out of shape, looks slow, not explosive. Finally had a good game against Arizona in week 5 where he popped off for more than 100 yards. And then a couple of weeks later, he shreds his knee. And so with Aiyuk coming off the knee injury at that price tag, I think the best case scenario for the Niners as far as draft compensation returning is like a 4th round pick. More realistically, a 5th round pick. And isn't it so crazy how Deebo Samuel's name was mentioned in trade rumors a couple of years ago? Niners could have gotten a 1st or a 2nd potentially. Aiyuk's name this time last year floated in trade conversations. Could have gotten a 1st or 2nd. Well, they settled for a 5th for Deebo. And now if they want to trade Aiyuk, they could get a 4th or a 5th. Things change very quickly in the NFL. The other thing, too, if we get past April 1st, it makes 0 sense to trade Aiyuk because if he's on the team April 1st, it's a $23 million roster bonus that's guaranteed for this year. And then 2026 is more than $25 million in guaranteed money. So if Aiyuk's on this team post April 1, he's going to be with the Niners in 2025. The question then becomes twofold, right? When does he come back? And then when he comes back, what does he look like, and can he be that same player?
What was your exact question at the combine to Lynch? Do you remember what your exact question was?
Yeah, I said there's a report here in Indianapolis that teams are calling you about the availability of Brandon Aiyuk. Are you entertaining any of those trade calls?
And this is what John said. You get calls, and you always listen to calls. I think since Kyle and I have been here, we've been certainly a top 5, I believe, number 2 cash spending team in the 4 years. Going into the 4th year, I think we're the 4th highest cash spending team. So at some point, you have to reset a little bit or at least recalibrate. You can't just keep pressing the pedal. And I think there's some good that could come out. We need to get younger. I think we're the oldest team in football trying to make a run at the deal last year. And I think it's good to constantly get younger. So that was quite the answer for the question. And to me, and maybe I'm holding to this answer too strongly. Maybe I shouldn't be. But that one line where he's like, I think there's some good that could come out of it. Out of what? He never really said what, the good's coming from what. You asked him about trade rumors. So he's like, it's like, I'm supposed to understand that I think there's some good that could come out of it being a trade of Brandon Aiyuk is what I understood. We need to get younger. I think we're the old, so it sounded to me like he was planning on trading Brandon Aiyuk for either young players or, as we know, draft picks are always young players. So to me, that quote right there is why, if it, the Schefter report's nice today, but to me, that last line of the Schefter report still kind of keeps the door open, which is, hey, there might be a team out there that's willing to give up not give up very much to get a great player. Well, what is not very much? I mean, what do you think not very much is? What's the offer that gets the Niners to move Aiyuk in a trade, but is still not very much to the team trading for him?
Right. Yeah, and the interesting thing too, given what John Lynch said, trading away Aiyuk makes sense if that's what their plan is. And keep in mind that he had that answer before NFL free agency. So he said, we've been one of the highest cash spending teams. That's right. Last year, they spent over $330 million. They went 6-11. We want to get younger. They got younger in free agency. We want to save some money and shed some cap. They did that by letting multiple starters go who went to different organizations and combined got paid more than $300 million. And so the Aiyuk trade, unlike all of those other free agency moves, has yet to happen, but it fits what the plan has been and what their plan continues to be. And that's why I think the door is still ajar a little bit for the Niners to trade him away. I just think it comes down to there not being a lot of value because of the injury, because of the contract. And at this point, after free agency, the peak of it, which teams need a wide receiver? Like the Patriots, they signed Stephon Diggs. The Cleveland Browns could use one. The Los Angeles Chargers could use one. They have more than $40 million in cap room, but Jim Harbaugh never pays wideouts. They could use a number one because they have Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey. Brandon Aiyuk there with Justin Herbert, I think would be really intriguing. They don't really have a lot of holes elsewhere on the roster, but I just don't expect the Chargers to make a play for BA. And so the door is slightly open. I think the Niners, if they had their way, they'd trade him away, but not a lot of people are biting the bait.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound like there's a big market for him. But the question is, if that price comes down in the 11th hour,
right?
Do we see some action there? There is a guy named Desmond Watson who's in this draft who's 464 pounds. This is the Florida nose guard. Does that guy get drafted? I mean, does somebody look at him? And I bring this up because one of the stories out there today is that the NFL may ban the tush push. And they're talking about it. They're considering banning the tush push. The NFL's contemplating banning the tush push play, which, for those who don't know what we're talking about, it's a strategic variation of a quarterback sneak. The Eagles are predominantly the team that does it. It sparked a lot of debate across the league. The critics say, banning an effective play sets a dangerous precedent in sports, suggesting that strategy should be countered, not eliminated, which I generally agree with. The discussion around this play isn't centered on safety or fairness, but rather on the inability of defenses to actually stop the play.
Yeah.
There's a strong belief the Eagles would adapt and continue to dominate, with traditional quarterback sneaks, even if they didn't have the tush push available. But, I mean, do you think the NFL is going to ban the tush push? And if not, are the Eagles going to try to get a 7th-round pick and acquire Desmond Watson, the Florida nose guard, and use him as a fullback or something? I mean, he's 450 pounds, almost 400. He's 464 pounds. Excuse me. He's up from. But I'll say this though, this guy at his pro day in Gainesville benched 225 36 times.
That's insane.
So, yeah, that's an incredible number. He also his 40 was 593.
It's not
which
bad.
Is obviously, that's a sun. You can tape that with a sundial, but he also had a 25-inch vertical. I mean, that for 460 pounds, that's getting up. What do you think? Are the Eagles? Is Desmond Watson going to be an NFL player? And what's going to happen to the tush push?
Yeah, with the tush push, that dialogue from Diana Rossini was a little bit misleading because the Packers proposed to get it banned citing safety concerns. But number one, the NFL came out with the study. There were no injuries that came from that play. And then number two, it needs, I think, 22 votes from NFL owners in order to ban the play. And I don't think it's a play that should be banned. I know I disagree with a lot of people on this, but it's a play that requires timing, anticipation. It does involve uniqueness to a degree where the Eagles have the best offensive line in football and they have a quarterback who can squat 500, 600 pounds. And so if other teams could run it, I think that they would, but other teams have continued to try to run it. They're not as successful as the Eagles, and it's not even close. So I don't think you penalize one team for doing it at a really high level, especially when there are no safety concerns. My thought with Desmond Watson was this, like, if you have a couple of 7th round picks and you're in double digit picks that you've already made in the draft, why not take a flyer on this guy? Try to work with him to get under 400 pounds. Maybe he can shed 100 pounds to get down to 350. And in short yardage situations on the goal line, that's the guy that you have at nose tackle. I mean, what way to stop a quarterback sneak or to stop an inside run when you have a guy who's 464 pounds at 6'6", who can occupy a lot of real estate? Of course, the problem there is that you'd only be using him in short yardage situations. And do you want to have him occupy a 53-man roster spot? You could always have him as a practice squad guy who you elevate for game day, and then you monitor what his shape and conditioning level is. But I think there's an opportunity for this guy to play at the NFL level. I mean, when you're running that 40-yard dash at that size, you have that vertical leap. If you shed some weight, I think there's a good athlete in there. I think he is a good athlete being able to do that at that weight, but it's very concerning that he's that heavy. I mean, you're closing in on 5 bills. That's crazy.
That is crazy. Two last thoughts before we get out of here. Jordan Schultz had also kind of some details on the Brock Purdy deal, saying that, that they're working towards a deal, they're negotiating, they're hoping to get it before the season kicks off. Does that mean not till September? That always begs lots of extra questions. But He also had, hey, we expect this contract to sit between 50 and 55 million. I look at that as a nice compromise. It's not north of 60. It's not precedent setting, but it's also not 35 or 45 like some people have said. Oh, give him the Sam Darnold deal. Give him this deal. Mahomes makes 45. All this. It's reflective that there is a market, and it puts Brock in that $50 million club, but towards the bottom half. I think it gives 49ers some meat on the bone to go, left some meat on the bone so they can go build a team around him. I kind of look at if Schultz is right and this deal does get done and he doesn't have to hold out, and the deal's AAV is between, let's just say 50 and 55, obviously depending on how much guaranteed money there is. But I think overall, that potentially sounds like they're headed towards what I would consider a win-win, where the Niners get their quarterback. He's not turned off. They take care of him for the future, but they don't put him, he's not making north of Prescott money. He's not setting new precedents. And the cap's always going up. And so 50 to 55, in 2 years, I think is going to seem like a pretty relatively fair deal. What's your thought hearing those numbers?
I think if the Niners can sign Purdy to a contract of $50 to $55 million per year, obviously guaranteed money is going to be important, but the big benchmark is the AAV. I think it's a win for the Niners. I think it's a win for Brock Purdy too. Purdy isn't disrespected with that offer that could be a Sam Darnold deal that you mentioned, or $45 million per year. It still makes him a top 10 highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And I would love for the Niners to lock him up at 50 to 55 because it's a win for San Francisco with this thought, right? It still gives you an opportunity to build out the rest of your club, and your roster isn't watered down or weighed down by a huge salary for a quarterback, and you can continue to build around Brock Purdy and give him a bunch of complementary weapons. And I know that there were a lot of factors for why Purdy struggled in 2024. At offensive line play, Kyle Shanahan didn't have his best year. The defense sucked. Special teams was awful. But Brock Purdy also did not play his best football. He had some interceptions and moments that were head scratching. He tried to play too much hero ball. He wasn't as efficient as he was in 2023 when he had one of the most efficient quarterback seasons that we've ever seen. I mean, he was top 5 in MVP voting and in the running for NFL Offensive Player of the Year, right? So Purdy in 2023 was incredible. In 2024, he dipped down, but we saw with Deebo Samuel in and out of the lineup, George Kittle missing time, Jawan Jennings missing time, Ricky Pearsall out, Brandon Aiyuk out, Christian McCaffrey out. Purdy struggled, and he's not a quarterback who's going to carry your team. He needs some talent around him. So if it's 50 to 55 million, that's a win for Purdy. Still a top 10 highest paid quarterback in the NFL. It's a win for the Niners because with your team building strategy, you can afford to pay and invest in other players and not be in a Cowboys situation where they've become too Dak reliant. The Cowboys were always at their best with Dak when they had a good offensive line, good receiver talent, and a good run game. But since they paid Dak, the overall talent on that team isn't good enough. And so Dak has to shoulder the load, and the Cowboys have not been a good team as far as high-level success. The other thing, too, if you get Purdy at 50 to 55 million, that deal could end up actually being a bargain in a couple of years because the NFL salary cap is going to continue to go up. And the quarterback market is going to become more lucrative. And so in 3 years, 50 million, 55 million for Purdy could end up being a really good steal, a really good bargain if he plays more like he did in 2023, continues that, and you shore up special teams, you shore up defense, you have some offensive skill talent. Kyle Shanahan coaches to the level that he can coach to. Purdy plays to the level that he can play to. And I think that that would just be overall a really good situation for San Francisco. You start to get the 60 million per year. I think that's just too rich for Purdy.
All right, couple last thoughts I got to get from you. The Niners don't pick until 11 in this year's draft. And so I've been looking at a lot of what's going on as far as in front of them, as far as the prospects. And there's a lot of talk the Jets may take Jackson Dart with the 7th pick overall, which would push another good prospect down. I bring this up because according to CBS Sports' Jonathan Jones, Abdul Carter, who's got a foot injury, isn't working out today at Penn State's Pro Day. Today is the Penn State Pro Day in Happy Valley, and Carter's not working out. He also skipped the workout at the NFL Combine. He's got a stress reaction that was discovered in his foot, and it's put an injury red flag on Carter, who's the top, consensus top defensive end in the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, most of the mocks don't have Carter falling out of the top 4, and I can't imagine the guy that's as talented as him is going to slide too far overall. But what do you think? I mean, how serious is this foot injury? You're a PA guy. You're there. You're in Texas now, but you're following Penn State football. You're following Pennsylvania news. I mean, how serious is the Abdul Carter foot injury? Is it going to jeopardize his draft stock? And is there any chance that a player that some people think could go 1 could fall to 11 because of this foot injury, stress reaction in his foot, and because we don't, he didn't work out at the pro day, didn't work out at the combine. I mean, I expected he would work out at the pro day and everything would be fine. If they're asking NFL teams to draft this kid without any real pre-draft workout, that's a leap of faith, man. What are you hearing on Abdul Carter? Is there any chance that this foot injury? What are you hearing about the foot injury? Could it cause him to drop to 11? If it did, would you draft him at 11?
My previous job, I covered Penn State football, grew up watching that program under Joe Turno, so I know it well. What's interesting about Carter not working at the State Pro Day, it's not because of the foot. It's actually because of the shoulder injury he suffered late in the year. So he has the shoulder injury and the foot injury. And at the NFL Combine, it was pretty interesting because there was the report that he might need to get surgery. It wouldn't be a long recovery, but that's still somewhat significant considering he's a big body on a bad foot. And then the following day, there was the follow-up report, oh, he doesn't need surgery, he's going to be okay. So obviously with him not working out pre-draft, there are a lot of concerns, but he's my number one player in this draft class. The tape does not lie. He was so dominant last year at Penn State, and what's crazy is that was the first year true going to continue to get better and improve. Now, what's interesting about the draft board, I think Cam Ward goes number 1 to Tennessee, but at number 2 in the Giants, do the Browns go to Durr? Do the Giants, after signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, do they go Travis Hunter? So a player who I think should go number 1 could end up falling in that 5 to 7 range. And if I'm the Niners, I'm thinking about trading up, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Last thought. Interesting article out today, Chase. You cover the Eagles. The Eagles love Georgia guys. They've drafted a lot of Georgia guys. And NFL.com draft analyst Eric Edholm did his second mock draft. He's got the Niners taking Georgia's linebacker / defensive end Jalen Walker at 11. He says the Niners are now without Dre Greenlaw and Leonard Floyd. Technically, Walker can help you at both spots. Finding his exact role and position will be key, but the dynamic Georgia defender can be a traditional off-the-ball linebacker on typical rundowns and rush the quarterback in passing situations. He goes on to say his career snap count is split between edge and linebacker. His leadership is famous inside the Georgia building. He's still working to fine-tune his instincts and efficiency as an off-ball linebacker, but he's got take on and closing burst to become a productive pro at that spot. 89 tackles in his career, 19 for loss, 12.5 sacks, 3 passes defense, 1 forced fumble. You're around a lot of Eagle people, I'm sure, and you probably have your own thoughts on Walker from watching so much of Georgia football. How great is this guy? Better than Roquan? Is he worse? How great of a player is Jalen Walker in your mind? And is he viable for the 49ers? Is he, I don't think he's a defensive end, but I think he could be an awesome stacked linebacker. What do you think of Jalen Walker? What do you think of the Niners drafting Jalen Walker at 11?
I'd love him to the Niners at number 11. I think he's one of the more fascinating prospects in this class because I think that he can be a high-level off-ball coverage linebacker. He did it at a really high level at Georgia, but Georgia also used him as an edge rusher, and he's really talented in rushing the passer, getting after the quarterback. And so this is a player who you can use in a multitude of ways where off-ball linebacker, fine. Stuff in the run, he can do that as that stack backer. But in obvious pass rush situations, especially on 3rd and longs, he has the chops to sack the quarterback, get to the quarterback, and impact the game in that way as a pass rusher. And so I would love to see how Robert Saleh can utilize a player like that as a chess piece all around the defense for him to be a running mate to Fred Warner and at times a running mate to Nick Bosa. Love Jalen Walker.
That's going to do it for us. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor. Thanks to Mancini's for sponsoring this video as well. What do you got cooking the rest of the day on over at Chat Sports?
Yeah, put out a video a little bit earlier talking about that Adam Schefter update on Brandon Aiyuk. So did that, and then more draft content to come throughout the weekend. And whenever breaking news happens, always got to cover it.
Always enjoy our conversations, brother. We'll do it again next week. Good to see you.
You as well. See ya.
Thanks to everybody.